Hello and welcome to DJ Exotics. I'm David and this is Henry, and today we're going to be talking about how to encourage your snake to feed. Now before we get started, there are a couple of house rules. Number one, we are animal led, so if Henry decides that he doesn't want to be part of the video anymore, we will be replacing him. But secondly, also please remember to like, share and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much and let's get into it. So snake feeding is probably one of the more challenging aspects of keeping a snake, and there are individual snake species such as the royal python, sometimes hognoses and other species that can sometimes go off their food. So therefore we're always looking at how we can encourage our snakes to feed. There are some species that you won't have any problem with this, king snakes particularly. Also corn snakes are very good and tend to feed every single time. However, there are times when they will go off their food, and let's consider why that might be and what we can do to fix that. So the first one is actually a very simple one, and that's because they've gone into shedding. So if they've got eyes which look a little bit grayer, their colour is a little bit dulled, it's likely that your snake has actually gone into shed. Now in the shedding period, snakes are a little bit more vulnerable, they feel a bit more timid and scared, and they are less likely to actually go out hunting and hunt for prey. At that moment in time, what they're trying to do is just hunker down, get ready for the shedding process and shed out. So the best thing to do for this one is actually just make sure that you've got the right humidity in the enclosure and just watch your snake to shed. Once your snake has shed, it will likely take food on the same day. Now that isn't always the case. We do have snakes which will eat in sheds, such as our king snakes. One of our king snakes famously actually was in shed, just about to shed, so their eyes actually had cleared up, so it looked like they weren't in shed, but they took the mouse, shed with a mouse in their mouth, and then decided to eat. Or corn snakes will sometimes will eat no matter what, but we do have Shelby who won't eat in shed. Now the second thing is temperature, and we're talking about temperature inside the enclosure. If the temperature is even slightly off, then the snake will not eat because it doesn't have a way to digest. So say your heat mat or your overhead bulb has broken and it's feeding time and you don't realise this, the snake will refuse food because it's too cold to eat, and that is generally one of the bigger things. So you can settle this by making sure, if your snake's not feeding, to check the temperature inside the enclosure. Get one of the digital guns that we demonstrated in our video about everything that you might need for a leopard gecko but didn't know about, which you've got up here as a video. These temperature guns send out a little laser which basically detects the heat at a particular spot. Check the hot spot, make sure that's in the ideal range for your snake. Remember, different snakes have different temperatures ranges that they should be in. The next thing is also humidity. Again, humidity, if it's too humid or too dry, that can sometimes put a snake off feeding, and that is something that you've really got to consider. The next thing is the enclosure size. Now the enclosure size is a topic that we have discussed before about what size enclosure to get, and we've got it up here. Now not all snakes will have a problem with this. Corn snakes, king snakes are particularly quite good at eating and will probably not have this problem. Royal pythons are particularly bad. If the enclosure is too big, they will not feed in it. And we've discussed previously how they're all individuals. So our hognoses, we would love to have in bigger enclosures, but they won't feed in them. Royal pythons, we've put them in 4 foot and they prefer not to feed in that here. Other people don't have problems with that. I haven't tried every royal python, but I've tried enough in order to know that they won't feed in that. So we put them in 70 litre really useful boxes instead. And actually, in fact, when I've done the measurements for really useful boxes, have got more floor space, but they're not as long. They're more kind of square. So they've got the floor space, but they don't maybe have the length and the width. But that is just something that these guys do. They eat every single time in there, whereas they don't eat every single time in the live. And that's just something that I've learned to adjust to. Your royal python may eat perfectly fine in a 4 foot, but wouldn't eat in a row. And it's about using the individual as well. It's about testing those sorts of things. Now, remember that you should select an enclosure that has got the length and side and width that is the same length as the snake from the snout, so the front of them all the way up to the vent, which is where the tail begins. That's the minimum size. The maximum size is 1 length, so the longest length being the length of that snake. And if you get between those two measurements, I like to use the diagonal as a kind of rough guide, then your snake is likely to feed. Now the other problem that you might have is if you have the prey item, so the mouse, that is not at the right temperature. Royal pythons are particularly fussy on this one. If it's a couple of degrees out, sometimes they will not feed. Also, I have known royal pythons to not eat prey items because of the colour of the prey item. You know, it can be quite funny with these guys. With this kind of thing, it's just about maintaining that the prey item is at the right temperature and also the right colour, if that is the issue. You can use water to kind of get the temperature of the rodent to the right place. Please don't use the microwave. It's more likely to cause a mess inside the microwave. It's not hygienic and it irradiates the prey item, which is then going to go into your snake. You can use just hot water just to get that temperature there. Or you can use a heat mat. I've successfully used a heat mat set at the right temperature to keep the rodent at the right temperature and successfully fed afterwards. The other thing is that the snake is scared, so there isn't enough clutter inside the environment. Remember, you can use things like branches, plastic leaves, real plants, cork bark, the wooden bridges, all sorts of things, and 2 hides in there to make sure that it's really nice and cluttered for the reptile in order to make them feel safe and secure. And snakes are particularly wanting of that. Our enclosures are quite cluttered in order to give them enough hiding space so they feel safe and secure. Remember that in the wild you don't really see snakes, but you can probably go on a walk and you could probably walk past several of them and not even realise it, because they are very good hiders. They love to hide in nature. The other thing that it can be is that it's too busy in the area that they are. So if you have your snake in a very busy room where it's very loud and there's lots of noises, that can scare the snake. Now, it might not be noisy when you're feeding them, you might have it very quiet, but because of that initial noise that's around there often, that can be a very bad sign. So if it is too busy, the thing is to move the snake into a more comfortable environment where they can feel more secure. So take them away from that room, perhaps put them in another room, or perhaps put them in a different area of the room. That can often help you get them to feed. The other thing is actually illness. And unfortunately sometimes snakes do get ill. They do have issues such as respiratory issues, or they can have scent glands if they're a hognose. There are some things, shedding issues, so if they haven't shed quite properly, that can cause problems, and that can be an interesting thing that you have to deal with, taking them to the vet and ensuring that they are healthy, and realising how to actually how to help them get better. And once they get better, they often bounce back. The other thing that can actually cause a problem, and this is more of a case for species that like to brumate, is actually they're going into a brumation cycle that they're actually trying to cool down, not eat, because they're trying to empty their stomach, ready to go to sleep for a winter. If you've got hognoses and you live in a particularly cold area, then that can be an issue that you have. Again, the best thing to do in that scenario is to allow them to brumate, and that can be quite interesting. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please let us know if you've had any problems with feeding, and if any of those tips have helped you. Please like, share and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and bye for now.